Good afternoon. My name is Anabel Gonzalez, and I'm Deputy Director General at the World Trade Organization. Thank you for the opportunity to speak at this summit. Building supply chain resilience, the topic of this session, has become top of mind for all of us. This should not come as a surprise, given the multiple and compounding crises we face. COVID 19 and its continuing impact, widening geopolitical rifts, war in Ukraine, threats to food and energy security, climate change, and the list goes on. The challenge of building supply chain resilience is very real, but that does not seem to be the case with many of the proposed solutions. Plans to reshore, friendshore, or otherwise decouple from the global economy need to be based on facts and careful analysis. The evidence so far should give us pause before deciding to turn our backs on trade. First, despite all the debate, trade decoupling is not visible in the data, at least not yet. For both the United States and the European Union, trade with China is at or close to record levels. Instead of trade decoupling, what we see is global value chains adjusting either to take advantage of wage differentials or because firms are trying to diversify production locations and suppliers to make their supply chains less prone to disruption. Countries such as Vietnam, Cambodia, and Laos PDR are benefiting and have seen their participation in global value chains grow in leaps and bounds since 2010. Second, trade decoupling, if it happens, will be costly. The semiconductor industry, which is currently the object of a major multi-billion-dollar push in several other economies to relocate supply chains, illustrates what is at stake. A recent study by the Asian Development Bank estimates that relocating semiconductor supply chains to achieve regional self-sufficiency would increase chip prices by up to 65%. Just think about what that would mean for our modern, increasingly digital economies and how much wider the digital divide would be under those circumstances. The third piece of evidence that I want to put on the table is this. Trade decoupling does not equal supply security. One reason is that even purely domestic supply chains are vulnerable to shocks, as the recent baby formula crisis in the United States starkly reminded us. While scaling back global supply chains may reduce our exposure to far-flung disruptions, it would also hamper our ability to tap the global market to diversify suppliers, pool resources, and share information and expertise, all of which makes our economies better able to withstand crises when they hit. Indeed, during the pandemic, trade links made us stronger, not weaker. After some initial disruption, trade links became vital to produce and access critical medical supplies. The data tells the story. In 2020, even as the value of global trade decreased by 7%, trade in medical products increased by 16%. All this to say that the answer to building supply chain resilience lies not in trade decoupling, reshoring, or self-sufficiency, but in deeper, more diverse, and less concentrated global markets. And that requires multilateral trade cooperation, not the geopolitical or power-based trade approaches that are becoming increasingly fashionable among groups of countries. The fact is that multilateral trade cooperation is not a choice. It is an inevitability. This is especially the case if governments are serious about dealing with rapidly intensifying global threats. After all, microscopic viruses or carbon emissions care little about borders and require coordinated responses by all countries, not just a few. Let me highlight a few areas where multilateral trade cooperation alone can make a real difference. First, multilateral trade cooperation is essential to safeguard and expand opportunities for growth and development for all countries, especially the least developed ones. One of those opportunities is the meteoric rise of digital services trade. Global exports of digitally delivered services more than tripled between 2005 and 2019, growing far more rapidly than goods exports and other services exports. The pandemic has supercharged this trend. For example, Japan saw a 62% increase in exports of computer services, one of the highest in the world. All this is drastically changing who participates in trade, making it easier for women-owned companies and small businesses everywhere to connect to the global economy, and allowing developing countries to tap into new sources of growth, jobs, innovation, and diversification. Second, multilateral trade cooperation is our best and only bet to create a truly level playing field across the entire global economy, addressing head-on the perception by many that foreign competition is not fair, that it is distorted by market barriers and government actions is long overdue. Multilateral approaches to address subsidies in agriculture, manufacturing, and services could go a long way to reducing trade tensions and bolstering public support for globalization. And third, multilateral trade cooperation is vital to help solve the climate crisis. That's because we need open and predictable global markets to produce high quality and affordable green technologies, to facilitate access to green technologies by those who need them most, and to mobilize investment at the scale and speed needed to decarbonize the global economy over the next few decades. So, turning our backs on multilateral trade cooperation in favor of geopolitical or power based trade approaches would not be good for anyone, not for Asia, or indeed the world. On the contrary, it would open the door to protectionism and put an end to decades of the trade enabled growth and development that have helped Japan's global oriented companies, many of which are represented in today's event, to thrive and prosper. Don't get me wrong, multilateral trade cooperation, along with its institutional home, the World Trade Organization, are far from perfect. In fact, neither can remain as it is. They must both change to become more efficient, more effective, and more responsive to the realities and challenges of today's world. We need to reform multilateral trade cooperation, not retreat from it. The successful outcome of the WTO's 12th Ministerial Conference last June gives me hope. It is a once-in-a-generation opportunity to breathe new life into multilateral trade cooperation and the WTO. Japan, as the fifth leading trader of goods and commercial services in the world, is working hard with its trading partners to seize that opportunity. And here, I want to recognize the fantastic work that Japan is doing as co-chair of the talks in Geneva to develop global rules for digital trade. This is an incredibly important initiative that attracts almost 90 WTO members and would be a big step towards bringing the WTO into the 21st century. Let me conclude. Today's world needs more, not less, multilateral trade cooperation. Japan's commitment to revitalizing the WTO is therefore more important than ever. I look forward to engaging with all of you to drive forward a WTO reform process that delivers tangible benefits for resilience, inclusiveness, and sustainability in Japan and around the world. Thank you.